A miracle is a shift in perception from fear to love. All other emotions derive from those two. When the fear voice meets the love voice always wins because light is always more powerful than darkness. Lack is always fear-based. Any sense of insufficiency is an illusion because the entire world was created in utter, prolific, extravagant abundance. It would be very sad if we just trudged our way through life and survived. We're here to uplift the world and make the world more like heaven. We're all suffering somehow. Even the hard stuff guides us to our right place in the universe. What are we here for if not to make each other's lives easier?
Just being like completely transparent. There are times where I feel so connected to spirit, but then there's
Yeah.
times where I am not, and I feel so far. Is there any advice you have? Welcome everybody to the Heart Coherence Collaborative. I'm so excited. I have my new friend, Alan Cohen, joining us today. We were recommended Alan by our friend Lisa Natoli. And so after Lisa recommended you, I started diving into all of your material, and you have such a beautiful presence. Presence is definitely the word that comes to mind when I think of you. Even just being with you, I'm anchored in your presence. So I
Thank you,
appreciate it, and
brother.
I'm really honored to have our community meet you today. So if you could just start out, Alan, by sharing with our community who you are and your journey to get to where you are today.
Well, I'm basically a spiritual being. Everything else is details.
Nice.
Um, I was always interested in spirituality. At the age of 14, I adopted Orthodox Judaism as my path. I was very strict for 7 years, observing all the rules and laws. And then one night I figured fear was not a good enough reason to believe in God and do a religious act. And I realized that a lot of my religious practices were out of fear and guilt. And so I dumped it all overnight and I became a spiritual explorer. I traveled the world. I took psychedelics. I studied with Ram Dass. I went to Zen meetings and Christian meetings and Buddhist meetings and encountered devil people. And it was a very exciting time to really see what was out there. I met a mentor in the process named Hilda Charlton, who was a mystic who lived in India and came to America and teach in the 60s. She gave me an incredible foundation of integrity and connection. Then I discovered A Course in Miracles, and I began diving deep into that at age 30 or so. Around the same time, I wrote my first book, The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which, without any effort on my part, became a big success and a bestseller. So one thing led to the next. I've been guided to live in Hawaii for many years. Feel blessed to do that, and I do a lot of Course in Miracles teaching now. I do a lot of holistic life coach training now, and I feel very blessed to hang out with people like you and your viewers who share the spiritual path.
That's amazing. I would love to ask you for advice for anyone listening whose dragon still does live here.
Well, we all have that, don't we?
Yeah.
Um, I think A Course in Miracles has most helped me with that, Kyle. Course says that there's really only two emotions, fear and love, and all other emotions derive from those two. And every moment is a choice between the two. And so I like to identify two voices in the mind, the voice of fear and the voice of love or trust. And if you can isolate what the voice of fear is saying, you're not enough, you're stupid enough, you're too old, you're too fat, nobody would ever love you, you're not successful, you're a phony, all the long litany of negation. And then, okay, I hear you, but now what would the voice of love or trust say to counter that? You're enough. You're beautiful, you're whole, you deserve a great mate, you deserve prosperity, you deserve to be healthy, you deserve the kingdom of heaven even while you walk the earth. It's amazing, Kyle. I use this with all my coaching clients, and then they ask them, which voice feels better? And they always laugh. Well, of course. Okay, which one would you rather listen to? So when the fear voice meets the love voice always wins because light is always more powerful than darkness, and darkness is illusion anyway. And so it's a very simple healing technique. I still use it myself. I use it with all my clients. And it's basically a very simple path to discern who you are and what you deserve and how you want to live.
So it's basically dedicating time each day to start familiarizing with the voices? Is that the first step of the process?
Yes, that's a part of it. I mean, meditation or prayer is always an essential element of some spiritual life, but even more so, it's in the little choices of daily life. Like a guy cuts you off on the road. Do you want to flip him the bird? You don't want to say, well, maybe he's stressed. And so, you know, the Course in Miracles says that it's okay to go out and meditate in a cave for 40 years, but if you come back and somebody bumps into you on the street and you curse them out, you haven't really attained much enlightenment. So it's really in the relationships of daily life, business, sexuality, romance, friendship, family. Those are the real juicy places to practice wholeness. And if you can really remember your wholeness when you go home for Thanksgiving, you've got with your annoying uncle, you've really got it made. That's the real field to attain mastery.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I want to go back to what you said about your religious upbringing. I know a lot of people who struggle with breaking out of that pattern that they had from childhood into actually reconnecting with spirit. I know for me that the upbringing that I had what made it really challenging to like want to reconnect with that. I guess I had a misconception of what religion was, but you talk about fear and love. Can it be that simple for people to establish a connection with spirit? Can it actually just be that?
It's super simple.
Yeah.
But someone said the truth is simple. If it was complicated, everyone would understand it.
Yeah.
And so I like to really peel back the convolutions, the complications of life to what would the joy voice say? What would the ease voice? What would the self-affirming voice say? And religion has really amazingly convoluted, truth. There's a lot of truth in religion, but there's a lot of convolutions of truth. So I really want to honor you for stepping beyond that religious training because in some ways it helps, but in other ways it's stifling.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what was it like with Ram Dass? I'm sure people always want to know.
Yeah. Ram Dass was a very dear man. I had the good fortune to spend a lot of time with him on Maui because he moved to Maui like in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And so I saw him a lot between that and when he passed, I think around 2019. What a good-hearted, dear soul. As you know, he had a stroke, a debilitating stroke when he was in his 60s, and he spent the last 20 years of his life in a wheelchair. And even though he was quite limited physically, it did not stop him from soaring spiritually. And I would go to his house for dinner, he'd be laughing and making jokes, and he was just, he proved that we're not a body. He proved that love is the essence of our nature and that um, God is present even in physically challenging circumstances. Um, I did a couple programs with him. He was always fun. He was always and I I once interviewed him as one of our programs together. I played the devil's advocate. I said, Ram Dass, what would you say to somebody who says, there's so much suffering in the world and so many people in pain and there's wars and starvation and how can I possibly be happy when other people are suffering? He looked at me and said, change your mind.
Huh.
That was his answer. And of course, I've been thinking about that for years ever since.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. He came from like studying under Maharaji, right? Neem Karoli Baba.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Nick Crowley Ball. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever get into studying any of Neem Karoli Baba's philosophies?
Yeah, of course, because Ram Dass changed my life when I was 21. He utterly turned my life upside down and in a wonderful way. So I began to follow him and Maharaji. He has a couple books out with Maharaji's stories in it.
Yeah.
And he was a true miracle worker and a true healer. He loved to feed people. He helped everybody. His mind was the mind of God. And to be with him I wasn't with him personally, but to be with him was like to be with God.
Yeah. So there was another teacher that you had mentioned that you had said really had a positive impact on your life? And I had never heard that teacher's name before.
Her name was Hilda Charlton, and she was an American woman who went to India like in the 1940s, and she became a yogi. And she lived there for 18 years, and she walked barefoot through the Himalayas, and she lived with Sai Baba in his house, and she met Yogananda and all the great yogis. And she came back in the 60s, and she realized that just to fix her visa, and she realized there had been a cultural revolution, and millions of young people were on the spiritual path, and they were coming to her for guidance. And so she stayed in America, even though she didn't want to, for the rest of her life until 1988. And people would come to her house and line up outside her door every day. And she would take them in her room and work with them for a minute or an hour. Suicidal people, drug addicts, prostitutes. And she would like help them heal. She never charged a penny. I went to her classes for 14 years, 2 or 3 nights a week. I lived with her in a group in New York for years. And she was completely dedicated to service and healing. And she gave me a foundation on the spiritual path that was impeccable. I could not have learned from a better teacher. I'm so grateful for her.
Do you embody a lot of service work in your life? Do you feel like that's an important staple for people?
Yeah, it's really, it's most important for me to take good care of people.
Yeah,
And, my greatest joy in life is to see people shift and change and open up. I do a weekly free online Zoom meeting called the Miracle Room. And people come there and they get briefed 5, 10, 15-minute coaching with me. And they get a lot of support from the other people in the group. And, I think it was George Eliot, the English novelist, who said, "What are we here for if not to make each other's lives easier?" We're all suffering somehow. We're all in some kind of pain. And, to help lighten each other's burden, either even a little bit. I mean, what else, what else could you make a lot of money? Yeah, that's fun. But, to help somebody and relieve their suffering, it's about as good as it gets as I can find on the planet.
yeah, yeah. You talked about the importance of A Course in Miracles in your life. A lot of people actually that I have talked to kind of know you as like one of the Course in Miracles like figureheads. So I would just be curious to hear its impact on your life and where people should start with it because it's a big book. Should I start
Yeah.
with one? How do you recommend people dive in?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
found A Course in Miracles when I was about 30 years old. It had just come out actually. And I was a little leery of it because I thought it was like miracle doing like psychic manifesting rings and jewelry and holy ash. And I thought, it's kind of cheap. But I got the book and I opened it. And the first page jumped out at me like, you remember the old Batman movies? You go, pow, like,
yeah, yeah,
so I got a big pow, and the voice said, "This is true. This is real. I mean, dude, listen to this." So I started to work with it. It's been 40 years now, more. And I have never seen a more profound, transformational, deep, rich teaching. And there's other great teachings, of course. But for me, it really peels away fear. It peels away judgment. It heals relationship. It reconnects me with my spiritual source. It reminds me that I'm lovable and loved and empowered and and, Kyle, I've been doing this for 40 years, and every year feels like the first time. It
yeah,
just goes deep. I think it's bottomless. It just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's really, it's helped me know my worth as a spiritual being and know that I deserve heaven now. I do not have to struggle or strive or fight for my good, that I deserve what I have. I deserve wonderful things because who I am, not what I do. That grace is the force that blankets all of us if we're willing to receive it, and that one of the lessons is a happy outcome to all things is sure. So I'll have an issue and upset. I remember happy out things to all things, all things sure, happy out things to all things sure. And then I get a happy outcome eventually. And I realize that this course is teaching God's honest truth. And if anybody's willing to dive in and do the work, you get the results. You have to do the work. You can't just sit around and read it. You have to practice the lessons. but the thing works. If it works, work it.
Yeah.
Our mission here at the Heart Coherence Collaborative is to get people in touch with the healing power of the heart.
And we really need your help. Right now, only 1% of viewers subscribe. We are aiming to take that number to 6%.
The reason why we want to do that is the more people that subscribe, the more people in the world can learn the magical practice of heart coherence.
So please help us out. If you've ever listened, if you love this message, please just take a moment to subscribe.
Thank you so much. We love you.
We love you.
Yeah, I love that. You know, I think about my journey and just being like completely transparent. There are times where I feel so connected to spirit. Like I
Yeah.
actually feel, you know, I'm in it. And there's just such a divine, magical flow of life. But then there's
Yeah.
times where I am not, and I feel so far. And it's like God is either everything or nothing to me. And I was
Yeah.
just, you know, is there any advice you have? Because it can be tough, like especially when you've tasted it, you know, when you've tasted that beloved spirit and energy, it almost makes it worse when you're disconnected because you like, you know.
Yeah. In a way, it's a good thing that it makes it worse because the contrast motivates you to find your way back home.
Yeah, yeah,
So even the hard stuff guides us to our right place in the universe. And some of the hardest things that have ever happened to me have been the best things because they provided me with course corrections that ultimately put me on higher ground that changed my life forever.
yeah. I love that. Now, if you were, I know you're a young man, but if you could go back to, say, my age, what advice would you give somebody like me?
That's a good question. I would say, if I would go back to me when I was at your age, I would say drop guilt, because being raised Jewish, I've been very guilty. They say that the Jews invented guilt and the Catholics perfected it.
Yeah,
So, I think my biggest self-enemy was self-judgment over the course of my life, like picking at me even when I was doing good things and finding errors. So I would say drop guilt. There's no reason for it, it has no purpose. Trust yourself. Trust your guidance, your creativity, your inspirations, your intuitions. Be who you are, independent of the you that others would have you be. Those are things I've learned in the long run. If I learned them in the shorter run, I'd probably be even better off. But you learn what you learn when you need to learn it, and it's all perfect.
yeah. Now, how do you just drop guilt? I'm curious about that because I feel like that's the one thing that is really prevalent. I almost like attract people in my life that will reflect my own guilt. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And there's really nobody out there because they're just mirroring your own inner guilt.
yeah, right,
So they're
right.
all they're all serving you to remind you what's going on in your mind. Well, for me, coming back to the two voices. So, um, so the voice of guilt, what would the voice of innocence say? Let's take judgment, because judgment of others is just internal guilt projected outward. So I go to the beach and I have lots of judgments about the tourists. I don't like the way the bodies look. I don't like their tattoos. I don't like, no offense to tattoos, but some of them I find a little bit much. I don't like them spraying toxic sunscreen that sprays onto me. I don't like them yelling at their children. I don't like them blaring loud radios. I think, why can't they all be conscious ecologists like me and just be on a beach and meditate? So I have this long litany of judgments, and the voice says, "Well, how does that feel, Alan?" I don't feel so good. What would the voice of innocence say? Well, these are probably nice people for the most part. They're coming to Hawaii for vacation. Their kids are enjoying the beach. This could be a very healing experience for them to come from New York City to this lovely environment. So, Alan, why not just give them a break and let them be innocent, let them enjoy themselves, less you laying your judgments over them. And when I think that, Kyle, something in me goes, my solar plexus relaxes. And I can be there. And I can do that for myself too. If I judge myself as not, well, how would you be feeling differently, Alan, if you're willing to look at yourself from a viewpoint of innocence? It always feels better. It always feels right.
Yeah, that just relaxed me.
Like I'll tell you, I'll give you a personal example. Before I'm with a lovely partner, Dee. We've been together for 25 years now. And before I met her, I dated lots of women. I had lots of girlfriends over a long period of time. And I was always looking for somebody better.
Yeah.
And I would stay with somebody for a while and I'd get bored and look for somebody better. And I would end up breaking up with them. And after I got more conscious about that pattern, I ceased it and I dropped in with Dee. And I had lots of judgments about my activities as a young man with different women, you know. Then a lot of them started showing up again in my life as friends. They would write me emails, they would text me, they would show up at my workshops, they would send me birthday greetings. And I realized that for the most part, they loved me and forgave me.
Hmm.
Like they were much better with our parting than I was. I was still beating myself up for many years. And I think Spirit sent them around to remind me that there was another interpretation that I could have taken for those relationships, that I was innocent in being with them. I was innocent in leaving them. They ended up with husbands or whatever they were doing anyway. And I think the universe gave me grace to show me that there was an innocent interpretation of what I had been laying guilt over.
Hmm.
And now I'm at peace with those original relationships because I realized that it all turned out just fine anyway.
Yeah, I would love to dive into this a little bit deeper in regards to, you know, men and maybe the high school, middle school, college period, how we all behave. I mean, I'm not going to say all because that's a generalization. I'm sure there's some, perfect guy that just got it early where they lived a more selfless, caring, nurturing, relationship. But I think a lot of people that I've talked to that are men during that time, it was really confusing, and wanting the the just the way that we approached the relationship was very self-centered. And I think this is a common thing, and I think it's just important to address this guilt
Yeah.
that a lot of us feel in more depth, because I've felt it. I know a bunch of my friends have felt it, and um, some of them haven't even got out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, everybody's self-centered.
yeah,
Everybody's doing what they think will bring in the biggest reward. I actually spoke to my mentor about this years later. She said, "Well, you were young."
yeah,
And it's true. When you're young, you don't know everything. When you're young, you're ignorant of all kinds of stuff. When you're young, you make mistakes. When you're old, you make mistakes.
right, right, right,
And so why not reframe, men's attitudes as learning through exploration?
right.
And hopefully we grow out of limiting patterns and hopefully we recognize our mistakes and we correct them. And, what if it was all for learning? What if we all set up the perfect course for a learning curve, including the fun stuff and including the challenges? And when we look back on it, we see it was all a perfect learning curve that got us to where we would be.
Yeah,
If you wouldn't do it again, then you've learned from it.
right.
And even if you do, you're still learning from it.
Yeah, right. Now, I want to hear what your interpretation of a miracle is, because I know you're very big on miracles.
Yeah. A miracle, as A Course in Miracles teaches it, is a shift in perception. It's not necessarily jumping out of a wheelchair or seeing when you're blind, although that's wonderful. And the only real shift in perception is from fear to love. So, on a practical application, one of my students was getting divorced after 15 years, and she and her husband were amicably separating for the most part, but the sticking point was their pension plan. And their marriage agreement was that when one died, the other would get the other one's pension. And she wanted to keep that after they got divorced, but he didn't. And they went round and round and round about this for quite a while. Finally, as a Course in Miracles student, she said, I don't want to just keep fighting my husband. Let him have it. I'd rather get done with the marriage and get on with my life and trust. So she signed off on that agreement. A few days later, she gets a call from a woman, an older friend of hers, who said, I was meditating, thinking what to do about my will, and Spirit said I should leave my entire estate to you.
Wow.
And the estate was two homes, an apartment, a car, and a financial portfolio,
Wow.
which far exceeded what she would have gotten from her husband's pension plan. So in my world, Kyle, that's a demonstration that when we shift from fear to love, from doubt to trust, from separation to connection, from resistance to allowance, when we do the inner miracle, change of mind, then the outer world somehow miraculously reflects the inner change. That's how miracles work in my world.
Yeah. And now, is that what you would teach somebody struggling with abundance as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, lack is always fear-based.
Yeah.
Any sense of insufficiency is an illusion because the entire world was created in utter, prolific, extravagant abundance, opulent abundance. And for somebody to experience lack, they have to squeeze the hose, they have to crimp the hose in their mind so they do not allow that abundance in. And I've had so many moments when I just said, okay, I allow, and everything shows up. So God, the universe is constantly showering us with all forms of abundance, financial abundance, relationship abundance, health abundance, career abundance. And it's all there if we're willing to, step up to the smorgasbord and the banquet and eat of it. But otherwise, we're sitting around complaining not enough. Nobody loves me. All the good ones are taken or they're gay. I hear these things from women, on and on. And those are all statements that crimp the hose that keep abundance from us. So relaxing and allow. One of my books is called Relax into Wealth. And that's really the way it works.
Oh, I love that. And it can be that easy. Uh, I guess it's simple, but maybe not easy, right?
Takes practice. Simple, it
Yeah.
takes practice to change our old patterns.
Yeah, nice. I would love to hear more about some of like your offerings, some of the things that I know you have some courses and some books. Just I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by everything you've
I
created.
do a lot of Course in Miracles trainings, retreats in Hawaii, ongoing weekly courses. I do a holistic life coach training where I teach people to coach holistically, and those take up most of my time. I have the Miracle Room every week. So I do what works. If I don't like it, I stop doing it. If I don't
Yeah.
want to do it, I do what turns me on. And when I'm turned on, other people who want to be turned on are attracted to me. And so I kind of meet people on the common ground of celebration and creation and expansion. And, that's been the story of my life. I feel very blessed.
Yeah, nice. Now, you said holistic. Could you just explain why it's unique? You hear a lot of people that have coaching practices, but the holistic, I'm curious what that means to you.
Well, holistic means they're all connected, body, mind, and spirit. And more fundamentally, that we live from the inside out. And that outer things are an expression of inner choices. So a client comes to me and says, I was divorced a while back and had a bad divorce, nasty divorce, and I put a lot of weight on, and I can't seem to get the weight off. Went to the gym, changed my diet, got a trainer. No matter what I do, it goes off, it comes on, it goes off, it comes on. So I asked her a holistic question. I asked her, is there some way you might believe that keeping that weight on serves you? Because everything is an inner choice that's expressed in the outer world.
Mm.
She said, well, she was very honest. She said, well, maybe on some level, I don't want another man in my life at the moment. And I believe that if I'm overweight, I will not attract a man. I said, thank you for your honesty. Would you be willing to say no to men if that's your true choice without needing the weight to say it for you? She says, yeah, I got it. Okay. And so she was attempting to lose the weight at a very shallow level of manipulating the physical world. But when she began to manipulate the inner world and see the inside as the cause of the outside, that's where you start to get real changes. That's what holistic healing is.
I love that. You also had said that you wish that everyone else on the island was an ecologist like yourself. When you're kidding. Are you actually into like the environmental science stuff?
Well, not officially, but I recycle and I eat organic and I don't use any, pesticide. I mean, I try to live in harmony with nature. That's what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any practices that you do regularly, consistently that you feel like are important to your spiritual maintenance?
Yeah, I meditate every morning. I've done that since I'm 21 years old,
Mm,
and sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes an hour. And I think it's really important to start the day connected to spirit, because you know how they say the first 5 years of a child's life are the formative years of their whole life. Well, the first 5 minutes of your day are the formative minutes of your day. So I spend, a little bit of time just doing my Course in Miracles lesson, praying, meditating, visualizing, sending out good vibes. And I get my head on straight before I go to email, before I go to texting, before I see my family. And a few days when I haven't done that, I regretted it and I had to go back and start over. But I think any form of meditation that makes your mind more peaceful and your heart more open, talk about heart coherence, then you're really setting yourself up for a day that's going to win for everybody.
yeah. Do you have experience with heart coherence too?
Well, I haven't studied it scientifically like you have, but I know how it works.
Nice.
And I know that when I'm in my heart, I'm connected to my deepest truth.
Yeah,
And I also invite other people to connect to their deepest truth. And so I'm coherent with my heart, I'm coherent with spirit, I'm coherent with everybody else. So I guess that's pretty much what it is, would you say?
that's it. That's it. Yeah, that's the secret
Yeah.
sauce, man. Now,
Can I tell you a great story before you go on?
oh yeah, yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead. Tell me
because
all the stories.
talk about heart coherence. This to me is the best heart coherent story I've ever heard. So one of my students grew up with a father who was a war veteran, and he had PTSD, and he would break into outbursts, uncontrollably, unexpectedly. One night, he took out a gun and he lined her mother and five siblings and her up against the wall. He says, I'm going to shoot you all and I'm going to kill myself. Of course, they all freaked out terribly, except for my client. She said, Oh, no, you're not, Daddy. And she lunged to hug him. And when he felt her heart, he dropped the gun, fell into tears, fell on the ground, and the family surrounded him. So, in that crazy moment that could have ended up in a horrible tragedy, this one child who remained in her heart instead of dropping into fear potentially saved the lives of 5 or 6 people. You think that might be heart coherence?
I love that. That gave me chills. Now, you said that celebration is an important part of your practice. I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, there's a difference between surviving and thriving. A lot of people feel like their job is just to keep up with challenges and pay the bills and feed their kids. And of course, that's important. I prefer not to settle for that. And I prefer to encourage other people not to. There's an Amway convention, the title of which is Think Big, Settle for More. Think big, settle for more. So I truly believe, Kyle, that as divine beings, we're here for more than survival. That it would be very sad if we just trudged our way through life and survived. And a lot of people do, sadly. I think that we're here to express ourselves. I think we're here to bring great ideas to the world. There's Beethoven and Shakespeare's and Spielberg's and great writers and artists who Van Goghs who just we're here to uplift the world and make the world more like heaven. And simply struggling to survive is not more like heaven. It's really more like hell, isn't it? So I'm constantly encouraging people, sing, dance, do your art, do your classes, do your coaching, do your teaching, make a seminar, travel for fun, make love for fun. and just do things that raise your frequency to that of a divine being. And as you raise your frequency, you're such a gift to the planet that you elevate everyone you touch just by interacting with them. So to me, that's a celebratory level of existence rather than just a survival level.
Mm. At the very beginning of our conversation, I think you said you dabbled with psychedelics.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I would just be curious to hear your experience. Did you find it beneficial? What's your view on them today?
Yeah, yeah. I think they can be extremely helpful if used properly.
Yeah.
My first experience was listening to Ram Dass on a tape, on audio tape, where he told that he went to his guru Nim Karoli, and he gave him 4 hits of very strong acid, and nothing at all happened to him. So the idea is this guy was higher than acid, which was LSD, which was higher, pretty high as far as I could tell. And as I was experiencing that under the influence of LSD myself, something clicked inside me, and I realized that everything I had ever worried about was completely meaningless. That there was never any need to fear or worry. And I believed that I had died and gone to heaven. I believe that literally.
Yeah.
And then 3 or 4 later, I was back in school, and the war off, and I was, back in the world. But that experience never left me, and to me, I remember that it's really a vision of how good things can get if you let them. Now, of course, many people abused psychedelics and jumped off of roofs and stuff like that, which was sad. But I don't know if you know this, Kyle, but psychedelics, after being outlawed for many years, is now being reinstated legally.
Yeah.
Therapy for terminally ill and PTSD and stuff like that. So psychology and science is finally coming around to recognize their therapeutic value. And so I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, how can our collaborative support you in everything that you're doing?
You're already doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
I've watched a lot of your videos and you have some fantastic guests and you ask fantastic questions and you have a huge following. And I think just by you holding the space and inviting cool people to talk on your program and just affirming healing ideas, affirming heart coherence, um, I think making a major contribution to healing of the planet. You're already doing it, man.
Wow, that's really meaningful to me. Now, our collaborative in general, if I had to just like put a pulse on it, there's a lot of moving energy going on right now in the world, and they're all really trying their best to just be their best and live the best life they can. I'd be curious what advice you'd give them right now.
To say to them, is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, take your best shot. It's a crazy world. Yogananda once said, it's very useful to think of the world as a big mental institution, and everybody here is crazy, and people hang out with people who are crazy in the same way they are, and they agree on it. And so for somebody to remain relatively sane in a crazy world is a gift. Just don't drop into the insanity with everybody else. Don't go there. Ernest Holmes called this race thought. In other words, all the fear thoughts of the human race that just get rocketed into the atmosphere. And when you watch the news or argue over politics or worry about the election, when you get into that mindset, you're really contributing to the problem more than the solution. So my advice would be don't get into bed with negation. Don't vibrate with it, don't resist it. Do whatever it takes to stay in a high vibration yourself, and you will be a healing influence rather than a debilitating influence.
why do we get into bed with it sometimes? Like, why do we still get into bed with it when we know better sometimes?
It's a habit.
Yeah,
It's a habit.
yeah,
And we give our power away to the external world. We think that what other people are thinking and believing is true, even if it's not.
yeah,
We watch the economy, which is based on fear and emotion often, If you play the stock market, it goes up and down with people's fears and emotions. So it takes a real commitment to keep your head on straight when other people are losing theirs. And that's what you're doing. You're doing it with your podcast. I'm doing it my own way. And each of us has to do it on our own. When your kids get crazy, can you stay sane? I mean, that's really what, what the game is. That's what all the cookies are.
Yeah. And now you had your team sent me over that, the focus of this talk should be how trust, I think is
Yeah.
the pathway to miracles. So I'd love to hear you just talk a little bit more about the importance of
Yeah.
trust.
Well, Course in Miracles says that trust is the bedrock of the teacher of God's entire thought system. It says that you have to trust yourself, you have to trust life, you have to trust your brothers and sisters, you have to trust God. And so we might say that everything is an exercise in trust. Once I was getting ready to fly from Maui to California, and I was in the airport, and the announcement came, there's a mechanical problem, there'll be a 2-hour delay. Now, I had put in for a first class upgrade and was denied. So I thought, let me go to the desk and see if I can fight for my upgrade. I grew up in New Jersey, and I was taught that the way you get stuff is you get in people's face. So let me get in the lady's face and maybe she'll go. But there's a long line of people who formed before me. I thought, I'm going to be standing here for an hour waiting to get in somebody's face, and she'll probably say no anyway. And the voice said to me, Alan, what do you teach? And I answered, my inner voice. You teach trust. Okay, if you were trusting now, Alan, what would you be doing differently? I thought, well, I would get out of line. I want to go to the executive lounge where I had a pass. I'd put my feet up and have some orange juice and do some emails and take a nap and come back at time for the flight and just trust. It's exactly what I did. Came back a few minutes before boarding. Voice comes over the PA system. Would Mr. Cohen please come to the desk? Yes. Well, your upgrade came through. She said, I have no idea where that seed came from. It was not there a minute ago.
Nice.
Cool, thank you. So I walk away, and you're supposed to give them these coupons to redeem, for payment for the upgrade. So I said, would you like a coupon? Oh no, the computer here says this seat is paid for. That's good enough for me. I said, yeah, good enough for me too. Thank you very much. My favorite flight. And once again, like the lady who gave up her pension plan, to me, it was a physical, tangible 3D demonstration that trust has observable effects. And even if I didn't get the flight, so, the upgrade, so at least I was at peace. And of course, miracles say, even if you don't get the upgrade, choosing peace is the reward of choosing trust.
Oh, I love that. And you had said that, so, to keep doing what we're doing to interview cool people. Is there any cool people that you really think are super cool that we should try to reach
Oh,
out to? Not to put you on the spot.
yeah. Well, you might have had them all. My friend Marie Manucherry. Have you had Marie
No,
on?
no.
She's a great healer and psychic, and she does energy work healing. Mike Dooley. Have you had Mike
Yeah,
on?
Mike's a good friend. Yeah, Mike.
Mike is cool. Let me think about it. I'll email
Yeah.
you with some other ideas. It's nice to
Awesome.
share. Have you had Dougal Fraser on? Dougal
No,
on?
no, no.
He's a very brilliant psychic. I'll send you some names. There's a lot of good
Yeah.
people out there.
That's one of the things that we're doing for like the next few months is we just reached out to our collaborative and said, whoever you recommend, we're going to interview and see where it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah,
So we're
yeah,
excited about it. Yeah.
yeah,
If there's ever any way we can support you, we would love to. We love your energy. I know
yeah.
we
Thank
really
you.
wanted to be here, but just let us know however we can
Yeah,
support you
yeah.
moving forward.
Well, I do have a new book out. It's called Of Course in Miracles.
Oh,
It
nice.
just came out. It's very popular, and it's everything we're talking about in a pretty, slim book. So this is out on Amazon now. It's doing quite well. So that's one way you can support me if your viewers want to read this book.
That's so amazing. Like, usually most people that we have on, if they have a new book, it's like the first thing that they'll tell you. And it's like, I didn't even know you had a new book. So could you tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more about it?
Well, it's everything we're talking about. Some of the stories are in there. It's really about making every day a miraculous experience
Right.
without struggling, without beating yourself up, without going through many years of psychoanalysis, without, the huff puff factor. It's really about the easy way to enlightenment. I don't mean the lazy way, but the way that values ease more than struggle. That's what it's about.
Oh, I love that. Any final message for the Heart Coherence Collaborative?
Yeah. What you're doing with this podcast, both of you, is really, really important. At a time on the planet when there's so much fear and resistance and struggle and loneliness and separation, any contribution to heart and life sends out ripples that affect the universe in far more profound ways than you or I will ever know. So please, both of you, do not underestimate the power of what you're doing. And all those who watch this podcast, whether it's once or regularly, do not underestimate the power of coming together and sharing this consciousness. By you simply watching these podcasts, putting yourself in a high vibration, you are becoming a miracle worker, literally, and exerting a major transformational influence on the planet. Don't underestimate what we're doing. It's big, it's powerful, it's healing, and one day we'll recognize its importance.
Alan, you are the man, and it was great getting to meet you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, brother. It's my pleasure. Keep
Bye,
up.
everybody. We love you.